Hey Life Groups, welcome back and thank you so much for gathering this week. We're in the 8th week of our series on Abraham, and one of the common threads throughout this entire series has been God's promises to Abraham and Sarah that God would bless them and that through them all the families on earth would be blessed. Now, it's fair to assume that Abraham had no idea what this really meant, but we today get to look back at this promise and see God's amazing plan. You see, Abraham and Sarah, they were never meant to see the entire picture, but rather trust God's promises. This understanding that there's a bigger plan at work, even if you and I don't see the end result. Ultimately, the entire story of Abraham is a story of faith, and sometimes he does well, but other times he gets impatient and takes matters into his own hands, and I think that many of us could relate to that as well. But in this past weekend's message, one of God's promises to Abraham and Sarah was finally fulfilled, and God provides them with a son, and they name him Isaac. Abraham finally has an heir. And in his message, Matt talked about two overarching themes of God's miraculous provision and man's joyful obedience. So let's start with God's miraculous provision. In Genesis 21, Isaac is born, and there's a reminder that God is sovereign over all circumstances and that his timing is perfect. Think about it. It had been 25 years, a 25-year journey with God from Genesis 12 to Genesis 21 for Abraham and Sarah to receive their miracle. All they could do was trust God. They tried handling things on their own, and it didn't go well. It didn't work out. But God was working out his own plan in his own timing. And maybe you found yourself in the middle of a holding pattern, in the middle of a waiting season. Matt encouraged us to find commitment in the waiting, trusting that God's timing and plan is perfect, even when those plans and timing doesn't line up with our own. 1 Peter 5 says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you." The second overarching theme is man's joyful obedience. God's miraculous provision brought Abraham and Sarah the child and blessing they desperately desired. Now, instead of people laughing at them for daring to have faith in God's promises, people would laugh with them. So the promise had arrived, and now it's time for obedience. For Abraham and Sarah, it was naming their son Isaac and circumcising him, which they were instructed to do in chapter 17. And for us, if we have living faith, action should or action will follow. Selected obedience is not obedience at all. It is simply and merely convenience. So our challenge to you is to be faithful in the little things. Be faithful in the obedience, because the greater the blessing, the greater the opportunity for God to test our faith. And the question we have to answer for ourselves is, will we obey God in the little things, realizing that he is preparing us for far greater acts of obedience? Enjoy your discussion today.